I still don't know what was worse, the silence or the moment it was finally broken. That empty space where my wife should have been, the hours stretching into something unbearable, the gnawing thoughts that spiraled until my mind felt like a tangled mess. And then, just when I thought I'd get answers, when I thought she'd walk through that door with an explanation that would make sense, she didn't. Instead, I walked away first. My name is Everett. I've been married to Lorraine for almost 7 years. We weren't perfect, but I thought we were solid. We had inside jokes, we had routines, we had history. That history meant something to me. I thought it meant something to her too. But then she disappeared. It happened on a Friday. She kissed me goodbye that morning like usual, her lips lingering just a second longer than normal. I remember it because it made me smile. That little moment of affection, the way she squeezed my arm before stepping out the door, it felt real. It felt like love. But love doesn't vanish without a trace. I came home that evening, expecting the usual. Her car in the driveway, the smell of dinner, the sound of her humming in the kitchen. Instead, I was met with silence. An empty house. My first thought wasn't panic. It was confusion. I pulled out my phone and checked my messages. Nothing. No missed calls, no texts. Maybe she got caught up somewhere. Maybe her phone died. Maybe. I made dinner alone, setting aside a plate for her, fully expecting her to walk in at any second, apologizing for the delay. But an hour passed. Then 2. Then 5. By midnight, confusion had turned into something colder. I called her. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Nothing. I texted. I checked her location, but she had turned it off. That was when my stomach dropped. Lorraine never turned off her location. I started pacing, my mind racing through every possible explanation. An accident? No. If something had happened, I would have gotten a call. Work emergency? She wasn't even on call this weekend. A family issue? She would have told me. Then, an even worse thought crept in. What if she wasn't lost? What if she wasn't in trouble? What if she just wasn't coming back? I told myself I was overreacting. She wouldn't do that. She wouldn't just disappear on me, right? By the time the sun started rising, my denial had turned into something raw, something ugly. And yet, I still held on to hope. Until she walked through the door, 24 hours later. And that was when I knew, whatever she had done, whatever she had chosen over me that night, I couldn't be here anymore. So, before she could even speak, before she could feed me the first of what I knew would be endless lies, I left. I don't know what I expected when Lorraine finally came home. Maybe a look of regret. Maybe tears. Maybe some desperate explanation, some ridiculous story she'd hope I'd believe. But what I got was something else entirely. She walked in like nothing had happened. Her hair was slightly messy, her makeup smudged just enough that I could tell she had tried to fix it in a hurry. She was wearing the same clothes she had left in, except now her blouse had an extra wrinkle or two, and her sleeves were rolled up. Her shoes, normally pristine, had scuff marks along the sides, as if she had been walking somewhere she didn't belong. And then there was her face. The moment she saw me standing in the living room, her entire expression changed. I don't even know what she was expecting. Me to be asleep? Out looking for her? Sitting here, waiting like a fool for her to waltz back in? I watched the way her mouth opened slightly, how her eyes darted around the room like she was searching for the right words. But I didn't need words. I already knew everything. I had spent the past 24 hours in every possible emotional state. Confusion, anger, fear, doubt. But by the time she stepped through that door, all that was left was clarity. I wasn't going to wait for an explanation. I wasn't going to let her shape the story. I grabbed my bag, the one I had packed while waiting for her to come home, the one sitting at my feet since sunrise. She didn't even notice it at first, not until I moved toward the door. That's when she spoke. Everett? Her voice was cautious, as if she wasn't sure whether she should be relieved or afraid. I didn't stop. Wait, where are you going? That made me pause. The sheer audacity of her to ask me that question. Where was I going? After she had vanished? I turned to face her, and for a split second, I saw something flicker across her face. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't fear. It was calculation. She was already trying to figure out how to spin this. Where was I going? I repeated, my voice calm, controlled. I wanted to laugh at how ridiculous it sounded coming from her lips. Lorraine, where were you? Her mouth opened, then closed. I saw her weigh her options, deciding whether to lie or tell me some half-truth that would sound believable enough. It's not what you think, she started. There it was. The first attempt at damage control. I exhaled sharply and shook my head. You don't even know what I think, Lorraine. But let me make one thing clear. I don't care. She blinked. You don't? I stepped past her, toward the door. I don't care where you were. I don't care what excuse you're about to come up with. And I really don't care about whatever story you're about to spin. Everett, wait. I heard the slight panic in her voice now. She wasn't used to this. I was supposed to be the patient one, the reasonable one, the man who always gave her the benefit of the doubt, the one who would sit down and listen to her excuses, pick apart her words, work through it like an idiot who still believed in fixing something that was already broken. Not this time. Not anymore. Everett, stop. She rushed forward as I reached for the doorknob, her fingers grabbing onto my sleeve. Just talk to me. Please. I turned, slowly. I wanted to look her in the eye when I said what came next. I did talk, Lorraine. Every night, for years, I talked. I asked. I trusted. And look where that got me. I yanked my arm free. She was shaking her head now, scrambling for something, anything to get me to stay. You're leaving over this? You don't even know what happened. I gave her the smallest, coldest smile I could manage. Exactly. And with that, I walked out the door. She didn't chase me. She didn't call my name again. I don't even know if she tried to follow, because I didn't look back. I didn't expect leaving to feel this easy. That's not to say it didn't hurt. It did. But it wasn't the kind of pain that makes you hesitate. It wasn't the kind that forces you to reconsider your choices or think, maybe I should turn around. Maybe I should listen. No, this was different. This was relief. As I stepped outside, the crisp morning air hit me like a jolt of electricity. It smelled fresh, clean, unlike the house I had just walked out of, a house that had once been a home, but now felt like a place filled with things I no longer recognized. I gripped the handle of my suitcase a little tighter. I didn't pack much, just the essentials. A few changes of clothes, my laptop, my important documents. I hadn't rushed while packing. I had spent all night making sure I took exactly what I needed. I had plenty of time, because Lorraine had given me that time. 24 hours. 24 hours where she had been somewhere else, doing something else. Or worse, someone else. I clenched my jaw. I still didn't have proof. But proof didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that she was gone long enough to make me stop believing in us. I walked to my car, opened the door, and slid into the driver's seat. I started the engine, but I didn't pull away just yet. Instead, I sat there for a moment, hands gripping the wheel, staring at the house I used to love. The curtains in our bedroom were still closed. Was she standing behind them right now, watching me? Was she panicking? Or did she think she could still fix this? I didn't wait to find out. I put the car in reverse and pulled out of the driveway. As I turned onto the main road, my phone vibrated against the passenger seat. I didn't need to check to know who it was. It was her, Lorraine, the same woman who had vanished without a trace, who had walked through the door looking like she had lived an entirely separate life in the span of one night, and who now, wanted to talk. I let the phone ring. She tried again, and again. By the fourth call, I sighed and grabbed my phone. Not to answer, to block her number. And just like that, the silence I had longed for, the silence I needed, returned. For the first time in a long time, I felt something close to peace. But peace never lasts, does it? Because just as I was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, I was finally free of her, a message popped up from an unknown number. Everett, please. You don't understand. I stared at it for a long moment, and then, without hesitation, I blocked that number too. I drove aimlessly for a while. I had nowhere to be, no one waiting for me. That should have been a bad thing, right? A man without a home, without a plan. But all I felt was a strange sense of clarity. It was over. I wasn't one of those guys who begged for explanations. I didn't need to know where Lorraine had been that night, what she had been doing, Or with whom? Because I already knew the answer, even if I didn't have the details. She made a choice. And now, so had I. But that didn't mean she was going to let me go so easily. An hour into my drive, my phone vibrated again. Another unknown number. I blocked it without hesitation. Then another. And another. She was scrambling, desperate to reach me, trying every method she could think of. But I was done listening. I pulled into the parking lot of a small roadside diner, the kind of place where nobody asks questions. I needed coffee, maybe some time to sit and let reality settle in. Inside, it was quiet. A few truckers sat at the counter, a couple of older women chatting in a booth near the window. I took a seat in the corner, away from everyone, and ordered a coffee. I should have felt relief, freedom. But as I stared at the swirling steam rising from my cup, I realized something unsettling. I wasn't alone. Not physically. There was no one watching me, no shadowy figure lurking in the distance. But Lorraine was still here. Not her body, not her voice, but the weight of her. The way she had looked at me when I walked out. The way she had hesitated before speaking, like she was calculating her next move. And the texts. Everett, please. You don't understand. I exhaled slowly, running a hand down my face. What was I supposed to not understand? She disappeared for 24 hours. She didn't call. She didn't text. She turned off her location. Then she walked in like she had nothing to explain. What part of that was complicated? The waitress walked over, refilling my coffee. Rough morning, she asked, offering a small, knowing smile. I let out a dry chuckle. You could say that. Let me guess, she said, placing the coffee pot back on the table. Woman trouble. I shook my head, staring down at the black liquid in front of me. More like woman gone trouble. She laughed lightly. Well, sometimes that's a good thing. I didn't respond, because I wasn't sure if she was right. Because Lorraine might have been physically gone from my life, but she wasn't gone. Not really. And then, as if to prove my point, my phone vibrated again. Not a call. Not a text. An email. I hesitated before opening it, already knowing who it was from. Subject, just listen. I clenched my jaw but clicked anyway. And as I read the first line, my entire body tensed. Everett, before you shut me out completely, you need to know something. It wasn't what you think. Please, I'm begging you. Call me. I exhaled through my nose, fighting the urge to throw my phone across the table. She was still trying, still pushing, still refusing to let me walk away. I deleted the email without responding, but deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. I wanted to pretend I had moved on, that I wasn't curious, that I didn't care about whatever Lorraine had to say. But the truth was, her words stuck with me. It wasn't what you think. What the hell did that even mean? I wasn't an idiot. I knew what I saw, or rather what I didn't see. A wife who vanished without explanation. A wife who came home looking different. A wife who had no excuse ready when I walked out. And yet, even as I told myself I was done, something kept tugging at me. Not hope, no, hope was dead. But curiosity? That was harder to kill. Still, I refused to respond. I spent the next 2 days in a cheap motel, scrolling through job listings in another state, trying to figure out what my next move would be. I didn't tell anyone where I was. I had no family nearby, no close friends who would ask questions. I was truly, completely off the grid. Or at least, I thought I was. On the third day, another email came through. Subject, I'll stop after this. I hovered my thumb over the delete button, but something made me pause. Was this it? The last message? Would she finally let me go? I clicked it, and I immediately regretted it. Everett, I know you don't want to hear from me. I know you've blocked my calls, my texts, everything. And I get it. I do. But there's something you need to know. I wasn't with another man that night. I wasn't cheating. I swear on everything, I wasn't. My jaw tightened. Liar. But I also wasn't alone that night. I didn't tell you because I was scared. Because I knew you'd leave. But if you don't believe anything else I say, believe this. What happened to me that night? It wasn't what you think. And I'm begging you. Just hear me out before you disappear forever. I read the message 3 times, trying to find the angle. This was a game. A manipulation tactic. Right? She wasn't cheating, but she wasn't alone? Then who the hell was she with? I didn't reply. I closed my laptop, stood up, and paced the motel room. She was lying. She had to be lying. But what if she wasn't? I hated that question. I hated that it lingered in my head, that it chipped away at the wall I had built. I had left for a reason. I was done. But this wasn't the confession I expected. I needed to know what she was playing at. So, against my better judgment, I reached for my phone. And for the first time since I walked out of our house, I unblocked her number. Not to forgive her. Not to give her another chance. Just to hear what ridiculous excuse she had prepared. I stared at the screen for a moment, inhaled sharply, then typed. You have one chance. Start talking. I hit send, and within seconds, my phone lit up with her reply. Everett, I need to see you in person. Please. It's not safe to talk about over the phone. My stomach tightened. Not safe? What the hell had Lorraine gotten herself into? Not safe to talk over the phone. Her words felt like a hook buried deep in my ribs, pulling at something I didn't want to acknowledge. I should have ignored it. I should have blocked her again. Instead, I sat on the edge of the motel bed, my fingers tightening around my phone as I stared at her message. Not safe. Not safe. Was this some elaborate trick? A way to lure me back in? Or was there something else? Something I had completely missed? I forced a slow breath and typed out my response. Where are you? The reply came almost instantly. I'm still at the house, but I can meet you anywhere. Just, please, Everett, don't shut me out yet. I clenched my jaw. I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to see the house that no longer felt like home, but I needed to know, if only to finally shut the door on whatever game she was playing. I'll meet you at Ridgeway Park. Half an hour. I set my phone down and ran a hand through my hair. I had no idea what I was walking into, but one thing was certain. This wasn't just about a cheating wife anymore. Something else was happening, and I was about to find out what. Ridgeway Park was mostly empty when I arrived. It was an old community park, the kind with rusted playground equipment and faded benches. A few joggers passed by, but otherwise it was quiet. I pulled into the farthest parking space, my heart pounding with something I refused to call nerves. And then, I saw her. Lorraine was already there, standing near a picnic table, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. She looked different, not in the way she had after disappearing, but something deeper. There were dark circles under her eyes. Her shoulders hunched like she was carrying something heavy. She looked up as I approached, and for a second, she just stared at me. Everett, she whispered, her voice raw. I kept my distance. You said it wasn't safe to talk over the phone. Start talking. She flinched, but nodded. I wasn't with another man that night, she said, her voice shaking. I know that's what you think, and I don't blame you. But Everett, I swear, I wasn't cheating on you. I was, she swallowed hard. I was with my sister. I blinked. Your sister? Lorraine had a younger sister, Dina, but they were never close. As far as I knew, Dina lived in another state. I got a call from her out of nowhere, Lorraine continued. She was frantic. She told me she needed help, that she was in trouble. I didn't tell you because she asked me not to. She said no one could know. I narrowed my eyes. So, let me get this straight. You get a call from your sister, and instead of telling your husband, you disappear for 24 hours? You don't call. You don't text. You turn off your location. Do you have any idea how that looks, Lorraine? She nodded quickly, her eyes filling with something that looked suspiciously like tears. I do. I know. I should have told you. But Everett, her breath hitched. She was scared for her life. And now I think I might be too. A cold chill ran through me. What do you mean? She glanced around the park, as if making sure we were alone, then lowered her voice. The people she was running from? I think they're watching me now. I inhaled sharply, every instinct screaming at me that this was a bad idea, that I should have kept driving, never looking back. But it was too late. I had already stepped back into the storm, and I had a feeling I wasn't getting out unscathed. Lorraine's words hung in the cold air between us, heavy and suffocating. The people she was running from? I think they're watching me now. I should have laughed. I should have told her that was the worst excuse I'd ever heard. that she was making up some wild story to cover her tracks. But the problem was, I knew Lorraine, and the fear in her eyes wasn't fake. Start from the beginning, I said, my voice lower now, steadier. Who is after her? And why would they care about you? She shifted on her feet, glancing around like she expected someone to be lurking in the trees. I don't know everything. She wouldn't tell me the full story, just that she got involved with the wrong people. She took something from them, something she shouldn't have, and now they want it back. I exhaled slowly. And let me guess, she thought hiding out with you was the best plan? Lorraine nodded. She called me in a panic, said she had nowhere else to go. I didn't know what to do, Everett. She swallowed. I panicked. I got in the car and drove to meet her. I turned off my phone because I didn't want them tracking me. I stayed with her in some motel on the outskirts of town, trying to figure out how to help. I clenched my jaw. And in all that time, you couldn't send one message? Not a single damn text to let me know you weren't dead in a ditch. I was scared, she snapped, and for the first time, her voice cracked. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know if I was being followed. And I knew if I told you, you'd get involved, and I couldn't let that happen. I let out a bitter laugh. You couldn't let that happen? Lorraine, you made that choice for me. And now I'm standing here anyway. So tell me, what exactly have I walked into? She hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything. I wasn't getting the full truth. Where's Dina now? I asked. Lorraine swallowed hard. I don't know. She left before I came home. She said she had to go somewhere, but she wouldn't tell me where. And ever since then, I felt like someone's been watching me. There's a black SUV that keeps parking down the street. And I swear I've seen the same man at the grocery store, at the gas station. I shook my head. And you waited 3 days to tell me this? She clenched her fists. I didn't think you'd believe me. And you didn't, did you? The second you saw me, you walked out that door. I stared at her, my pulse hammering in my ears. She was right. I had made up my mind before she even opened her mouth. And yet, a black SUV, a sister on the run, a story that made no sense but still rang with some strange, undeniable truth. I rubbed a hand over my face, exhaling sharply. What exactly did Dina take? Lorraine hesitated again. Tell me. She looked around once more, lowering her voice. She said it was just a flash drive. But whatever's on it, Everett, people are willing to kill for it. A chill ran down my spine. This was insane. This wasn't my problem. But then Lorraine's face crumpled, her voice breaking as she whispered, I don't know what to do. And just like that, I realized something. No matter how angry I was, no matter how much I wanted to walk away again, I couldn't. Because whether I liked it or not, someone was watching her. And if that was true, then I wasn't just dealing with a broken marriage anymore. I was standing in the middle of something I wasn't prepared for. And I had a feeling that whatever was coming next, it was about to be worse. I should have walked away. Every instinct screamed at me to leave Lorraine standing there, to turn my back and let her deal with whatever mess she had dragged herself into. But I couldn't. Not because I forgave her. Not because I still loved her. But because something deep inside me told me this wasn't just her problem anymore. I took a slow breath, trying to steady my thoughts. What exactly did Dina say before she left? Lorraine wiped her hands down her jeans, a nervous habit she'd had since college. She told me to lay low, that she'd contact me when it was safe. But Everett, she hesitated, looking up at me with wide, desperate eyes. I don't think she's coming back. I clenched my jaw. So you don't know where she is. You don't have the flash drive. And you don't even know who's looking for it? She shook her head, guilt washing over her face. I sighed, dragging a hand through my hair. Then how do you even know they're watching you? Her hands trembled as she pulled out her phone. She tapped the screen, then handed it to me. I frowned, staring down at the open message thread. There was no sender name, no number, just a single text, sent that morning. We know you have it. Hand it over, or we come to you. My stomach twisted. This wasn't a game. Someone really thought Lorraine had the flash drive. And if they thought that, my blood ran cold. Did you tell them about me? I asked carefully, handing the phone back. Her breath hitched. No. I swear, Everett, I never mentioned you. I wanted to believe her, but I wasn't sure I could. I looked around the park, scanning the nearby cars, the tree line. Nothing looked out of place, but suddenly, the open space around us felt suffocating. "We can't talk here," I muttered. Lorraine nodded quickly. "Where do we go?" I hesitated. I had nowhere to take her, nowhere to go, but I needed time to think. "Get in the car." She didn't argue. She just followed me, sliding into the passenger seat as I pulled onto the road. We drove in silence for a long time, neither of us willing to break the tension that sat thick between us. Finally, Lorraine whispered, "What do we do?" I gripped the wheel tighter. I could leave. I could get on the highway and never look back. I didn't have to be a part of this, but the truth was, I already was. Because I knew Lorraine, and as much as I wanted to hate her, I couldn't ignore the way her hands shook, the way her voice cracked. She wasn't lying. Something was really happening. And if she was in danger, that meant I was too. I exhaled sharply, then said the words that sealed my fate. "We find Dina, and we end this." Lorraine looked at me, her lips parted in shock. You're staying?" I didn't look at her, but I nodded. Not because I wanted to, not because I forgave her, but because I needed answers. Because whoever was coming for her might already be coming for me too. And I wasn't going to sit around waiting for that to happen. I didn't know if I was making the right choice. Sitting in that car, gripping the wheel as Lorraine sat beside me, I realized something. I wasn't just staying to help her. I was staying because I needed closure. I needed to know the real truth, not just the broken pieces of it she had given me. I needed to end this, once and for all. We drove for hours, trying to figure out where Dina had gone. Lorraine tried calling her, messaging her, but there was nothing, just silence. But then, as we stopped for gas at a nearly abandoned station on the outskirts of town, Lorraine's phone buzzed. A single text. From Dina. "It's done. You're safe now. Don't look for me." Lorraine gasped, staring at the screen. What does that mean?" I took the phone from her and reread the message, my gut churning. It's done. Whoever was after her, whoever wanted that flash drive, wasn't a threat anymore. "She handled it," I muttered. Lorraine looked up at me, eyes full of doubt. "But how?" I shook my head. "I don't know. But maybe we don't need to." Lorraine sat back in her seat, shoulders slumping. "So, it's over?" I stared at the phone for a long moment. Yeah, it was over. At least, the danger was. But for me, the real ending had already happened the moment I walked out of our house. I wasn't staying. I had come this far because I needed to understand. Because some part of me, deep down, still wanted to believe Lorraine wasn't the woman I thought she was. But now I knew the truth. She wasn't a cheater, but she was someone who hid things from me. Someone who didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth when it mattered most. Someone who was willing to let me believe the worst about her instead of just saying, "I need your help." And that was enough for me to know I couldn't do this anymore. I turned to her, and when she met my gaze, something in her expression shifted. She saw it. The decision I had already made. "You're not coming home," she whispered. I exhaled, my grip loosening on the phone. "No, Lorraine, I'm not." She swallowed hard. "I thought now that you know." I shook my head. This wasn't just about what happened that night. It's about us. And I don't think there is an us anymore. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she didn't fight me. Maybe she knew this was inevitable. Maybe she had already lost me long before she disappeared that night. I started the car again, the engine rumbling in the quiet night. "Where will you go?" she asked softly. I stared at the open road ahead. "I don't know." And for the first time in a long time, that felt like a good thing. I dropped Lorraine off at home without another word. She hesitated before getting out, like she wanted to say something. But in the end, she didn't. And I drove away. Not out of anger, not out of resentment, but because I had finally let go. I had spent too much time trying to be the guy who fixed things. The guy who always gave second chances. But some things weren't meant to be fixed. Some things were just meant to end. And as I left that chapter of my life behind, the weight that had been sitting on my chest for days, for years, was finally gone. For the first time in a long time, I was free.